Hello, everybody. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about cognitive psychology and personality. And specifically, when we talk about cognitive psychology, what we're talking about is how the way you think affects your personality. And because the way you think can change, one of the main themes that's going to go through the theories that I'm going to talk about now is that your personality can shift from one situation to the other as your mind changes, as your thoughts change, etc. So I'm going to begin talking about reciprocal determinism, and this is Albert Bandura. Reciprocal determinism suggests that our personality takes into account three factors that interact with each other. And basically, what it suggests is that if one of these factors changes, we should expect that your personality should change in response to that. So the three factors are your cognitive factors, that is how you think, what you believe, your expectations, and your attitudes. Your behavior, which is going to include your actions, your verbal statements, and the choices you make. And the environment around you, which includes resources, consequences that might occur, and the literal physical settings around you. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say that you are at a party and we change just your cognitive factors, right? You were having a good time talking to people, and then someone said something, and everything else is still the same. You're still at the party, maybe you're even still dancing or walking around, but in your mind, the cognitive factors have changed. And that can totally change your personality, or at least the way you're expressing your personality in that moment. A moment ago, when you were having fun, you were dancing, you were high energy, you were trying to engage people, but now your cognitive factors have changed. And even though everything around you is still the same, your cognitive factors have changed the way you interact with the environment. Now you're more low energy. Maybe you're going to sit down. Maybe you're literally still dancing out there, but you're really not enjoying it. You seem not engaged. In the same way, you're studying, you're doing your best to figure out the information. Now, if some cognitive factor changes, there's a problem that you just don't get, right? That one cognitive factor can change your entire response, essentially your personality, at least in that very moment. And so before you were very engaged, now you don't get this problem and it messes up the whole rest of the study session. You're tired, you don't want to engage, etc. So again, your cognitive factors can change the way you are responding. Your environment can also change your personality and how you're reacting. So maybe you're, I don't know, a sassy waitress and you totally know what you're doing, you're super engaged, and then something in the environment changes. For example, someone kidnaps your son. Now you're a maniac driving your SUV through the highway, trying to catch whoever it was that stole your son. There's a movie, by the way. Again, she's still who she is, right? And a lot of her cognitive factors are still the same. She loves her son. If she were at work, she would know how to do her job. But something in the environment has changed. And so her entire demeanor is going to change because of that. Maybe you were a lowly janitor playing video games at night and not really interacting with the world. And then something in the environment changes, right? Somebody comes from the future and tells you that you're secretly the one, and now you go out to save the universe. There's a TV show, by the way. But again, any change in the environment can affect you in a way that it will essentially look like your personality has changed. It doesn't mean that your attitudes have changed or that you believe things differently now. It just means that the way you're reacting is different. And so your personality seems to have shifted. The same thing with your behavior, right? You all know this is true because you've interacted with your parents somewhere like this, right? You're failing at math, and what are you going to do? You're going to wait till dad is relaxed, doing something that he really enjoys. Because when you tell him Dad, I'm failing math, since Dad is relaxed and he's doing something that he enjoys, he's much more willing to tell you that it's okay and that we'll figure it out. But if you tell Dad that you're failing in the middle of him doing the bills, well, there's a good chance that Dad is going to take that a lot worse and he's not going to be so nice this time. All right, guys. So again, reciprocal determinism has three factors: cognitive factors, behavior, and environmental factors. And if you change any one of those, the response is that your personality will seem to have shifted. Another theory that focuses on cognition is what we call the locus of control. Here, the word locus means location. And so, what we're asking is, where does this person assume that the control of their life is located? Some people have an internal locus of control. That means that they believe or expect that their life is controlled by them, by themselves. And some people have an external locus of control, which means that they assume that life is being controlled by someone or something else. Someone with an internal locus of control is going to think, if I want to pass the test, I have to study, right? Because they assume that in order for the test to get passed, I have to do something because I control my life. But people with an external locus of control don't feel that way. They feel that the control of their life is somewhere else. And they'll say things like, you can study all you want, but if you're going to fail, you're just going to fail. It's luck. It's the teacher, whether the teacher likes you or not, whether the teacher writes a test that's understandable or not, something along those lines, right? It's the man, it's society, it's something else that's not me. Now, if you have an internal locus of control and you have an interview to go to, again, you're going to assume that you have to do something to take control over your life. And you're going to might think, I'm going to prepare for my interview. So ask me some questions so that I can practice. Or maybe I'm going to go on the internet and look for possible questions so I can practice. People with an external locus of control don't feel that way. They feel like you'll get the job because you know the manager. Or they might say, there's no way I was going to get that job. You have to know someone. Again, they assume that their life is being controlled by some outside force. Now, you'll notice that if you have an internal locus of control, there's a good chance that you're going to be more successful. Why? Because you tend to think, well, in order for me to succeed at X, I have to do Y and Z. Whereas people who have an external locus of control a lot of times don't prepare, they don't try, because they assume that it doesn't matter how much you try. What matters is if you have luck, if you know someone, society, the man, something along those lines. And so you might assume that it's good to have an internal locus of control and bad to have an external locus of control. And that's not quite right either. Because, of course, if you have an internal locus of control, what happens is when things go wrong, you tend to assume that it's your fault. I didn't get the job because they didn't like me or because I didn't prepare enough. I didn't pass the test because I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough. And of course, that can become quite difficult to deal with. And if you have an external locus of control, that sounds like it's always bad, but it's not. Because when you have an external locus of control, when things go wrong, then it doesn't hurt that much because you always assume that it wasn't your fault anyway, right? You know, you win some, you lose some. There was no way for me to get that because I didn't know anybody or whatever. Um, and so the truth is that it's good to have a balance between internal and external locus of control. You want to have enough of an internal locus of control so that you can get things done, so that you can think I have to plan. What should I do? I need to practice. I need to study. But you also want to have enough of an external locus of control so that when things go wrong, you can say, not everything is my fault. Sometimes things just happen. That's not always an easy balance for a lot of people to have, but you should practice having these thoughts. Again, this is cognitive psychology. What you're practicing here, or what is important here, is what your thoughts are. And so you do need to practice to have these different ways of thinking. Now, this is the last theory that I want to talk about personality. And what I'm focusing here is on self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is basically the belief that you have about your ability to meet some demand. In other words, how much do you think I can do this? Your self-efficacy, again, can affect your personality. If you think you can do it versus if you think you cannot do it, that can shift your personality quite drastically, actually. And one of the easiest ways to think about this is when you compare it with another variable, which is outcome expectation. Whether you have high expectations that the environment is going to be helpful, or if you have low expectations that the environment is going to be helpful. And so, to give you an example, we're going to pretend that you are a high school student. And in high school, you are walking to first period. And in first period, let's say that you have math. And in this example, you have very high self-efficacy for math, meaning you think you're good at math, but you have low expectations of that math class, or that math class is going to be helpful. Maybe the teacher is a little rude, or when you ask the teacher questions, she doesn't really answer them. And so you think to yourself, this teacher, this class is not being helpful. In fact, it's the opposite. It's almost hurting me. And what's going to happen is that there's a good chance that you're going to get angry. You might start protesting. You might start talking back to the teacher. And you might even try and get the other students to sort of back you up, right? You might, again, have sort of that social activism, because when you think, I know that I can do it, but this environment is actually sort of working against me, it gets you angry and it makes you want to change the environment. This is why a lot of times protesters have this dynamic. They feel I should be able to succeed. I have the skills and the ability to succeed. But something in this environment, in this culture, is trying to hold me down. And that makes you angry, and it makes you want to change the environment. It makes you want to change the world. Now, let's say you're in math, the bell rings, and you're going to go to science. And again, you'll notice there that you have high self-efficacy in science, meaning you think you're good at science. In this classroom, you have high expectations. You feel that this teacher is trying to help you to succeed, that the class is good and is helping you to learn. Well, this is going to change your personality slightly. Now you're going to be more self-assured. You are going to be more engaged. You're more likely to listen to the teacher, to practice whatever the assignment was, to go home and do the homework, do the reading, because you feel like, yeah, I'm good at this. I have expectations that I can succeed in this environment because the teacher is good, because the class is good, whatever. And so you are more engaged. Now, let's say that now is third period and you are going to history. And in your history class, you actually have low self-efficacy. You don't think you're good at history. Maybe you're not good with dates or something like that. And you have low expectations for the class anyway. You think the teacher's not very good, or the assignments don't make sense. Again, you kind of feel like this class isn't trying to help me. In fact, it might actually be trying to hurt me. And so what happens here when you pair low self-efficacy with low expectations in the environment? You stop caring. You become resigned to essentially failing. Um, you have sort of apathy, you devalue the task. You say, who needs this class anyway? Who needs to know all this stuff anyway? I'm sure you've heard some of your peers say that. Uh, you might have even said that. And sometimes it's like, yeah, you totally need to know that. Everybody knows you need to know that. But when you have this dynamic, low self efficacy with low expectations that the environment will help you, oftentimes the reaction is that you just stop caring. Now, even though not caring about your class can be bad, it's not the very worst thing. The very worst thing when it comes to self efficacy is if you have low self efficacy and high expectations that the environment is going to help you, right? So let's say it's fourth period now, and you're going to your art class. And in your art class, you have low self efficacy. You don't think that you can draw well or paint well, something like that. But the teacher really goes out of her way to make the class fun and interesting, and she's very supportive. That's actually a really bad dynamic, because when you can't blame the class, when you can't blame the environment, then what your brain does is that it starts to blame itself. And so you go, instead of devaluing the class, you start to devalue yourself, and you think, I'm bad, I'm worthless. Look at this teacher. She's trying so hard to teach me, and I can't learn anything. So it's actually a really bad dynamic to have. It can lead to depression and feelings of worthlessness. So again, guys, these are cognitive theories. What's important here, what we're looking at here, is how the way you think affects your personality.